August 1944. Poland. Night. The air trembles with heat. On the front line, German Tigers await orders, while in the shadow of the forest, Soviet IS-2 tanks silently prepare their guns. In a moment, the first shot of the 122mm gun will tear the silence apart, a shot that will change the course of the war. Summer 1943. At the factories of the Soviet Union, the air still smelled of soot after the evacuation. Metal was being melted day and night. Amid this exhaustion and tension, engineer Fyodor Petrov made a move that many considered madness. He proposed to mount on the new heavy tank not the usual 85mm gun, but a massive 122mm howitzer, a weapon never meant for tanks, designed instead to destroy concrete fortifications and bunkers. On the day he presented his project in the design bureau, silence fell. Someone smirked, "Petrov, are you trying to turn a tank into artillery?" Another added, "That monster won't even be able to reload." Indeed, each shell weighed over 20 kilograms, and the barrel, nearly 6 meters long, seemed impossible to handle. But Petrov didn't back down. He knew, if the Red Army wanted to reach Berlin, it needed a weapon that could shatter German armor with a single shot. He believed that strength lay not in the number of shots fired, but in their devastating truth. He said, "We don't have to shoot fast. We must shoot so that the enemy is silenced forever." Those words became both his oath and his curse. For weeks, his idea wandered through the offices of superiors. Some called the project useless, others too expensive. But in Moscow, they already understood, on the front, new German monsters, the Tigers and Panthers, stood invincible before ordinary tanks. Reports from the Battle of Kursk showed that not a single T-34 could stand toe-to-toe with a Tiger in a direct fight. Approval of Petrov's project was now only a matter of time. Thus began the story of the D-25T gun, the one that would later become the heart of the IS-2. Its barrel spoke briefly but thunderously. One shot, and the enemy's turret would fly into the air. For the designers, it was a triumph of reason over fear. For Petrov, proof that madness is sometimes just another form of courage. In a world where thousands of decisions were born from despair, this madness became the beginning of a new weapon, one that would change the very nature of war. In the shadows of factory halls, a steel idea was born, destined to become a nightmare for the German Tigers. The Battle of Kursk became the place where the world first witnessed the clash of machines built at the limits of human capability. Two philosophies of war collided there, German precision and Soviet determination. After that battle, the Soviet High Command realized, the new war required not only courage, but new weapons. From Kursk to Moscow came reports, the Tiger is invulnerable from the front. Its armor resisted both the 45mm and 76mm shells. Soldiers told how their rounds ricocheted off the monster's front, how steel sparked and melted under its return fire. Germany had placed on the battlefield a symbol of superiority. The Soviet Union had to answer with a symbol of retribution. In August 1943, a meeting was held in the Kremlin where the idea of a new heavy tank was born, not just a machine, but a battering ram capable of breaking defenses, destroying fortifications, and crushing the enemy's spirit. Iosif Stalin said simply, "We need a tank that can kill a Tiger with one shot." Thus came the order, to create a new heavy tank, Iosif Stalin. The name was not just a tribute to the leader, it was a promise. This tank was to embody the entire nation, stubborn, unbroken, pushing forward through fire and ruins. At the Kirov plant in Chelyabinsk, there was no time for pathos. People worked in freezing workshops, under the roar of metal and the wail of sirens. Every bolt, every detail was forged to the sounds of distant explosions at the front. Workers didn't know if they would survive their shift, but they knew their labor would become a weapon of vengeance. The new design demanded everything, new machines, new steel, new ideas. Engineers worked day and night, sketching diagrams directly on the walls because there was no paper. Banners hung in the shops, "Every liter of steel is a blow against fascism." There was no propaganda in those words, it was a truth they felt in their skin. After 3 months, the first prototype of the IS rolled off the line. It was crude, heavy, and slow, but within its shape, the future IS-2 could already be seen, the steel hammer of the Red Army. When the machine was first brought to the proving ground, everyone fell silent. The tank moved slowly but confidently, each meter of its progress echoing like a heartbeat through the ground. From the D-25's barrel came the first shot. The earth shook. The officers exchanged glances. They weren't just witnessing a test, they were witnessing the birth of a power Europe had never seen. No one that day knew that this machine would enter Berlin a year later. No one could have predicted that the name Iosif Stalin would soon echo across the front like a spell. But even then, amid the roar of the test range, the engineers understood, they had created not just a tank, but an argument history itself could not refute. The first IS-2 left the factory gates in winter. The metal on its hull was still warm, the interior smelled of oil and smoke. No one knew if it would survive in battle. Everything drawn on blueprints now had to prove itself in reality. The first firing trials took place at a snow-covered range near Chelyabinsk. When the crew loaded a shell weighing over 20 kilograms, even seasoned tankers exchanged wary looks. The thunder of the shot shook the earth, the air, and echoed off the walls of the workshops. The D-25 gun proved its right to exist, its shell could pierce armor over 100 millimeters thick. But that power came at a price. Reloading took long seconds, and the recoil could knock the weapon from the hands of an unprepared gunner. During trials, gearboxes broke, torsion bars bent, hydraulics leaked. Every day, engineers corrected errors, with no time for sleep. One tester said, "We're not afraid of explosions. We're afraid of stopping." Those words became the motto of the designers. Petrov watched every shot, every strike of the tracks against frozen earth. He understood, to defeat the Tiger, you needed not just a weapon, but character, and the machine itself had to possess that character. After hundreds of test runs, the IS-2 began to change. The frontal armor was sloped, the hull reinforced, and extra space was added for ammunition. Tankers began calling it the Steel Beast. Heavier, but more obedient. Slower, but relentless. By spring 1944, the IS-2 was declared ready for battle. On the day the first train convoy departed for the front, the factory workers stood along the rails. No one applauded, no one shouted. They simply watched as the steel giant rolled toward the place where the fate of the country would be decided. Petrov stood on the platform, holding his factory-dusted helmet. He didn't smile. He knew that ahead lay blood, fire, and death. But he also knew that from that day on, the Red Army had a weapon that could speak for the entire nation. And when it spoke, the world would hear an answer made of steel. August 1944. Poland. The small village of Ogledow became the stage for one of the shortest yet most symbolic duels of the war. At dawn, fog drifted along the sandy roads. In the distance, engines rumbled, German Tiger IIs advanced towards Soviet positions. They moved slowly, confidently, like beasts that knew no fear. To meet them moved a platoon of Soviet IS-2s under the command of Lieutenant Pavel Yudilov, just a few machines against a column of the newest German tanks. The terrain seemed deceptively calm, low hills, soft sand, groves on the flanks. Yudilov understood that in an open battle, he stood no chance. So he made a decision that would later be called madness. He ordered his tanks to take up an ambush and wait until the Tigers entered the kill zone on their own. When the first German tank appeared on the road, the air froze. The commander pressed his binoculars to his eyes. Giant silhouettes with crosses on their armor moved straight toward them. Yudilov raised his hand, and the entire crew tensed, like a bowstring before release. The first shot thundered like a lightning strike. A 122mm shell hit the frontal armor plate of the lead Tiger, dead center. The armor cracked. The machine stopped, caught fire, and an explosion hurled its hatch-covered dozens of meters away. The second shot, and another German tank was burning, its turret torn from its mount. The third, and the entire column froze. The remaining Tigers tried to turn around, but the sand sucked in their tracks. The battle lasted only a few minutes. When the smoke cleared, 3 burning German tanks stood on the road. 3 more had been abandoned, their crews fled for their lives. The Red Army soldiers climbed out of their hatches, staring at the flames as if they couldn't believe they had achieved the impossible. Later, those 3 intact Tiger IIs would be sent to Kubinka for examination. There, engineers measured the penetration marks and confirmed what every tanker now knew: the D-25T shell could pierce armor once thought impenetrable. For the Germans, Oguldow was a shock. Wehrmacht intelligence reported. The new Russian tank surpasses our machines in firepower. For the first time in the entire war, German crews began refusing to engage the IS-2 in battle. They didn't fear its speed or its numbers, they feared that single strike after which there would be no second chance. Utilov and his crew received decorations. But the reports of their heroism were brief, only a few lines. No one wrote about the fear before the first shot, the ringing in their ears after the explosion, or the smell of burning armor. History doesn't like emotion. It remembers only facts. And there was one fact: near Oguldow, the IS-2 proved its true purpose for the first time. It didn't just defeat the Tiger, it shattered the myth of German superiority. From that day on, the war was no longer a hunt of German beasts against Soviet machines. Now, we became the hunters. Soldiers said. When the IS fires, the earth trembles, and the sky holds its breath. For the enemy, that sound became the beginning of the end. With every shot, the Red Army drew closer to Berlin, and the word Oguldow entered the chronicles of the war, the day when willpower and steel fused into a single blow. After Oguldow, the IS-2 ceased to be just a heavy tank. It became a weapon that dictated the rules of battle. If earlier the Soviet one shot could turn a fortified house into rubble, the next could level a bunker full of machine gunners. Tactics changed. The IS-2 was now used as an assault gun, a shield of the offensive. On the streets of Warsaw, Königsberg, Poznan, the barrels of these tanks fired point-blank into windows and barricades. City by city, block by block, the heavy tanks cleared the way for the infantry, reducing everything in their path to dust. After every thunderous 122mm shot came silence, a silence heavier with fear than after dozens of skirmishes. German officers wrote in their reports. The Russians advance slowly, but they cannot be stopped. Every house we hold, they turn into dust. The IS-2 was never in a hurry, it knew its strength. Its very presence broke resistance. Engineers, watching the battles, began improving the design for new tasks. They added mounts for towing artillery, strengthened the rear armor, and improved the driver's visibility. The machine grew ever more suited for assault warfare. Every battle became a test of steel and will. Infantrymen marching behind the IS-2 said. When it fires, you feel immortal. For them, this tank became a symbol of protection, a living wall behind which one could walk even through hell. Thus a new principle of war was born. Not speed, but strength. Not numbers, but confidence. The Red Army stopped chasing the enemy. It began crushing him, step by step, meter by meter. The IS-2 became not just a weapon, but the embodiment of the nation's character, patient, resilient, merciless in truth. Where once German tanks had felt like hunters, now they were the prey. Every IS-2 shot was not just fire, it was a sentence for everything that still dared to resist. The rhythm of war changed. Now the rhythm was set by a blow of steel. Spring 1945. Europe was burning out. From the west came the Allies, from the east, the Red Army. Ahead lay Berlin, the heart of the Reich, the final bastion of Nazi arrogance. Before its walls stood thousands of Soviet tanks, and among them, the IS-2, now the symbol of the final strike. At the city's approaches, the air roared. It was thick with smoke and dust. Every block was turned into a fortress, every house, a firing point. But where soldiers could not advance, the IS-2 went in. Its 122mm gun smashed through walls, tore down gates, cleared paths for the assault troops. On the tank armor stood soldiers with submachine guns, pressed against the scorching steel. On the turrets were white inscriptions. For the motherland. For Stalin. For Warsaw. For each of them, those words were not slogans, they were oaths. They knew, behind every shot lay one step closer to home, to the end of the war. German units fought desperately. From basements came Panzerfausts, from windows, machine gun fire. But the IS-2 kept moving, slowly, yet unstoppably. Its armor blackened from soot, but it did not yield. One shot, and a building collapsed. Another, and a street was cleared. The roar was so powerful it shattered windows a kilometer away from the front line. At the sea-low heights, where the Germans built their last line of defense, the IS-2s went first, under crossfire, through swamps and craters. One commander said, "When the IS moves forward, the earth itself helps it." And indeed, nothing could stop it. On April 23, the tanks broke into Berlin. On the squares, among ruins and flames, IS-2s took positions near the Reichstag. Their barrels pointed upward, like the final salute to the victory that was already in the air. In those days, the IS-2 ceased to be just a machine. It became the mark of an era, the embodiment of the idea that even in hell, one can remain strong. When soldiers raised the victory banner over the Reichstag, the ground beneath them trembled, the same ground over which the IS-2 had rolled, the steel hammer that smashed a road to peace. Victory never comes for free. Behind every triumph lie hundreds of nameless dead, thousands of weary faces, endless nights of cold and smoke. So it was with the IS-2. Behind its power stood people, ordinary workers, engineers, and tankers who paid with their lives for every second of glory. In the battles for Berlin, many crews never returned. Tanks burned together with the cities, turning into black obelisks among the ruins. Sometimes after a battle, only the scorched hulls were found, the steel melted, yet the gun barrels still pointed west, toward the enemy. That was the essence of the IS-2, to stand till the end, even when all around had turned to ashes. In factories far behind the front, women and teenagers worked around the clock, without sleep or rest. Their hands were burned from the metal, their eyes red from smoke. But no one stopped. Every bolt, every track link was a part of the destiny of those who fought. Between the workshop and the battlefield, there was no difference. In both places, steel rang and the word life echoed. A veteran later said, "We didn't think of heroism. We just knew we must." That must became the greatest weapon of the war, not tanks, not guns, but the people who could not allow themselves to fall. The IS-2 became a legend not because it was stronger than other machines, but because behind every armor plate beat a human heart, honest, like memory itself. In one corner stands an old IS-2 tank, covered with dust and rust. Its hull has darkened, but its lines remain majestic. It seems as if it's waiting for a signal that will never come. The world has changed. There is no more roar of artillery, no more marches or commands. Yet, in this silence, you can still hear the echo of that same 122mm shot, an echo that will not let us forget the price of peace. The IS-2 became more than just a weapon, it became a metaphor for a nation that knew how to endure, to suffer, and to triumph. Its story is the story of a people who refused to let fear become their fate. Every bolt, every scratch on its armor bears the mark of those who gave everything for tomorrow. Many who built and drove these machines are gone now. But in museums, on pedestals, in faded photographs, they are still here. They look at us from the past, calm, without pride or pretense, as people who did their duty and never asked for thanks. They knew the truth, not glory, but memory. History doesn't ask who was right. It remembers those who stood firm. The IS-2 became a reminder of that. When it seemed the enemy was invincible, when everything was collapsing, someone said, "We will do the impossible." And they did. Over the years, its armor has rusted, but the strength of this machine has not faded, because its true power lies not in steel, but in the people behind it, every engineer, soldier, worker, every woman who carried shells. All of them were part of one single strike that forever changed the course of the war. Today, children touch the cold steel of the IS-2, unaware that within it still lives the heat of those who fought. They see just a tank, but history sees proof that spirit is stronger than fire, faith tougher than steel. The day when people laughed at that idea became the day when history began writing the verdict for those who didn't believe. And from that moment on, the game was over. If you're still listening, write in the comments which story you'd like to hear next. Thank you.